Emily was a captivating presence in her quaint hometown, her beauty shining brightly against the backdrop of rustic homes and verdant landscapes. She hailed from a family renowned for their sprawling farm on the town's outskirts. Her father, George, commanded respect as a diligent and reliable farmer, though he occasionally partook in the local custom of celebrating their hard-earned wages. In this tradition, men handed over their earnings to their wives, kept a portion for personal expenses, then donned their best attire for a night of camaraderie and libations with fellow villagers, often culminating in a visit to the sauna, followed by drinks. George faithfully adhered to this ritual, never facing reproach from Emily's mother, Anne, who understood the toil he endured for their farm's prosperity. Ensuring their home's financial stability, George would jest with Anne before departing. "Shall I go then? Don't shame me today." Clad in the attire of his fellow farmers and laborers, he would journey to a neighboring village where their communal gathering spot awaited, a haven for the hard-working men to revel in their efforts. However, one tragic night, returning home inebriated on motorcycles with his comrades, George attempted to ford the river Eur, a decision that would prove fatal. The circumstances of the accident remained shrouded in ambiguity, but its aftermath was devastating. George perished in the motorcycle mishap, narrowly avoiding claiming another life in the sidecar. The village was engulfed in sorrow. Anne's lamentations echoed profoundly, mourning not only her husband's loss, but the haunting silence left in his absence. In the aftermath of the tragedy, the family abode transformed into a sanctuary for the mourning community. Anne grappled with the harsh realities of survival, confiding in friends and family about their uncertain future. Despite the adversities, they managed to sustain the farm, liquidating a portion of their cattle and rallying together as a familial unit. As the years passed, Emily burgeoned into a striking beauty by the age of 18, captivating the attention of visitors to their village, particularly during the bustling summer months when Anne sold farm produce. The business thrived, affording Emily the means to rival anyone in town with her fashionable attire. During this period, a determined young man named Michael captured her heart. His earnest intentions were unmistakable from the outset. They exchanged vows in the autumn, and Emily bid farewell to her rural upbringing, promising her mother frequent visits. Initially, she fulfilled her pledge, but as the demands of life, especially her burgeoning career, intensified, her visits dwindled. She gently broached the idea of Anne downsizing the farm, a notion Anne had contemplated herself, musing, "What use do I have for so many cattle now that I am alone? Perhaps the granddaughters will relish the summers here." Emily grappled with conflicting emotions, but made a concerted effort to visit her mother every 2 or 3 weeks, despite the demands of her own family. Anne empathized with her daughter's divided loyalties, recognizing that Emily now had her own household to tend to. When Emily gave birth to her first child, a son named Jack, 2 years into her marriage, both she and Michael were filled with elation. Michael, cradling his newborn son upon their return from the hospital, pledged to secure steady employment, understanding the necessity of stability for their burgeoning family. Emily's admiration for him deepened as she witnessed his dedication to providing for their home. She ensured to welcome him with his favorite dishes, and on weekends, they made a point to visit Anne, with little Jack in tow. As Michael's commitments at work intensified, he found himself staying late more often, introducing a new strain to their marriage. Emily couldn't discern the root of his frequent irritability and began harboring suspicions about his fidelity. This concern reached a boiling point one evening when she confronted him. Initially met with shock and denial, their relationship soon found equilibrium once more. However, this peace proved fleeting. 4 months later, Emily discovered she was pregnant once again. Overjoyed, she prepared a special dinner, celebrating the prospect of welcoming a daughter. However, that night as she lay in bed, the creak of the front door opening at 2 a.m. signaled trouble. Michael stumbled in, the stench of alcohol clinging to him, his shirt marred with lipstick stains. The following morning, after dropping Jack off at kindergarten, Emily returned home, too distraught to face the day's responsibilities. Seeking solace, she retired to rest, only to inadvertently overhear a phone conversation that confirmed her darkest suspicions. Michael was entangled in an affair. He ended the call abruptly upon noticing her and attempted to explain, but it was too late. Emily had heard enough. She quickly packed her belongings and took a significant portion of their savings. Leaving a note for Michael, she gathered Jack and told him they were going to AmITheA, a declaration of her newfound resolve for freedom. Outside, spring was in bloom, but inside, Emily's heart was tumultuous with change. Arriving at her mother's house, Anne instantly perceived the depth of her daughter's despair and welcomed them without hesitation. Despite the complications of her pregnancy and the fallout from her marriage, Emily found solace in her return to her roots, her mother's unwavering support, and the rural community that had shaped her. As she settled back into village life, adjusting to its rhythms with Jack by her side, Emily found a resilience she hadn't known she possessed. The future was uncertain, yet she was determined to rebuild and provide a loving, stable environment for her children. Firstly, the kids were new to preschool, and secondly, they spent almost the entire day there, coming home exhausted and hungry, though they ate well at school. Jacob, like his mother Emily's pregnancy, was growing quickly. She was expecting twins, which was initially a shock, but soon became a source of immense joy, especially when she found out they were both girls. Emily gave birth and soon after returned to her hometown with her children, staying just for 3 months before getting back to work. Living on just her mother's retirement income was tough. Her mom worked at the local clinic, handling supplies and logistics. No matter the circumstances, a woman's heart always seeks love, and Emily soon found herself in a relationship with a younger doctor in training, which didn't bother her. He pursued her persistently, and eventually, when the twins Max and Lily were about a year old, she gave in. The relationship was intense. Her mother didn't approve but kept silent, understanding the loneliness of young widowhood. The young doctor left abruptly without a goodbye. When the twins were born, her mother was distraught. "Emily, you're 30 with no job or husband, and now 5 kids? How will we manage?" Emily knew her concerns were valid. The little state support they received was not enough. She reluctantly contacted her ex-husband. "Hello, I need to know if you'll pay child support, or should I file for it? The 3 older kids are yours after all." "I don't have any money. Go ahead and file." Emily did, and her ex, John, never thought she would take such a step. But he was mistaken. When his new wife found out about the child support for the 3 children, she kicked him out. Recovering from childbirth took a while, and then Emily told her mom, "Child support helps, but it's not enough for everything." She started cleaning at a local school in addition to her clinic job. Her mom saw how hard Emily was working and felt sorry for her, especially for the kids. Her grandchildren were all beautiful and got along well. Their house was always lively, but in a good way. Jacob had started 1st grade, and the younger ones were still in preschool. On her day off, Emily sat at a table surrounded by piles of children's clothes, sewing a button here, patching a sock there. If she didn't mend them, they'd have nothing decent to wear. She spent almost every weekend sewing. Her mom noticed her deep in thought and asked, "What's on your mind?" Emily replied, "I need to move to the city. We can't make ends meet with what I earn here. Winter's coming. We all need jackets, boots, hats. I barely have anything myself. What do you think, Mom?" Her mother sighed, knowing Emily was right. Managing here with 5 young kids was too much, even if they were mostly at school during the day. "What can I say? Try your luck in the city. If it doesn't work out, you can always come back." A week later, Emily was leaving. The little ones were crying, and Jacob stood there looking concerned. "Mom, will you come to visit often?" "Of course, every weekend. Just keep up your spirits. We'll be waiting for you." Emily, as promised, visited regularly, bringing new clothes and treats. She left her mom with little money. She worked tirelessly. Once, coming home from a late shift, she nearly got hit by a car. The driver, named Nicholas, a local business owner of a chain of fragrance shops, apologized and offered her a ride, which she accepted. They struck up a conversation. Nicholas was unmarried, wealthy, and handsome, and he revealed he didn't want children, which explained his bachelor status. Emily fell for him, went to her mom, told her everything, brought more money than usual, and announced she'd be briefly visiting the coast with him. Her mother warned, "Think about this, Emily. You have 5 kids. He'll leave once he knows. Be honest with him. Don't mislead him." But Emily, overwhelmed by emotions, left secretly the next night. The following morning, she was already on a plane. Jacob woke up to find his mom gone, and his grandma looked worried. He approached her. "Grandma, what's wrong?" She replied vaguely, "Nothing, dear." Her health was failing, and Jacob rushed her to the hospital. She was reluctant, worried about her grandchildren coping without her. "Don't worry, I'm big enough to handle things," Jacob assured her, though he was only 9. She was briefly hospitalized but soon discharged herself and returned home, giving Jacob instructions on her care. As summer passed, there was no sign of Emily. The children often cried before bed. Grandma tried to comfort them with stories. One night after settling the kids, she sat with Jacob. "Aren't you going to sleep, dear? Mom left us, didn't she?" "No, Jacob, of course not. She's just working far away." "Don't lie to me, Grandma. I heard people saying she chose a man over us." "Ignore them. People gossip too much." Jacob went to bed, but his grandmother remained seated. Money had been transferred that day. Emily was trying to make up with money. From then on, Grandma's health declined. She sold the farm, and all household responsibilities fell to Jacob. He managed everything, causing his grandmother to tear up when she saw him washing dishes while his own homework wasn't done yet. She held on for 2 more years, but one morning didn't wake up. They buried her, and the house felt empty. They knew they'd be taken to foster care, and the little ones thought they were just moving. The next day they were driven to a large, imposing building. Jacob felt a deep sadness. The younger ones were silent, and suddenly Max cried out, "I don't want to go here, I want to go to Mom!" and ran down the street. Jacob immediately ran after his brother Max, but didn't make it in time. A car turned the corner suddenly, screeching to a halt with the driver's face contorted in horror. Max was lying face down. Jacob screamed so loudly it seemed his heart would burst. "Brother, brother!" He gasped for air. Finally, one of the social workers accompanying them snapped to reality and rushed to check Max's pulse, exclaiming, "He's alive! Call an ambulance, quickly!" Jacob was stunned. Alive? Until the ambulance arrived, he held Max's hand tightly, instructed by the social worker not to move him until the paramedics could assess him. They carefully moved Max onto a stretcher and into the ambulance. Jacob pleaded with the social workers. "Please, may I go with him? I will come back. I won't leave the others behind." But they gently refused, guiding him and his sister Lydia toward the orphanage doors. After a few weeks of difficult adjustment to orphanage life, Jacob was told that Max would be permanently disabled and would not return to the orphanage, but would live in a specialized care facility instead. A year later, Jacob managed to run away and find the facility. He begged on his knees to be allowed to see Max. It was a weekend with less strict supervision, so a sympathetic nurse helped him. She led him through long corridors and finally opened a door to Max's room. Max was lying on a bed by the window, looking out sadly. "Max," Jacob called softly, and his brother turned, his face lighting up with recognition. "Jacob!" They spoke for only 10 minutes before Max began to cry, pleading to be taken home. Suddenly, a caretaker entered with a police officer. They forcibly removed Jacob as Max reached out, crying. Jacob promised through his tears, "Max, don't cry, I will return. I promise I'll come back for you." Jacob only allowed himself to cry after the ward door closed behind him. Returning to the orphanage, he sat down to write a letter to his mother, remembering her address by heart from a single mention by their grandmother. Unsure if she was still there, he needed to reach out. "Hello, Mom. Your eldest son Jacob writes to you. We have a lot of news. You left and everything fell apart. Grandma got sick because of you and passed away. Then they took us to the orphanage. If only you knew, Mom, how tough it is here. I'm grown up, but Lydia, Vicky, and Nancy can't sleep. They call for you all the time. I tell them to forget that we don't have a mommy. Annie is always crying. Max isn't with us. When we were brought here, he tried to escape. He was running to you, Mom, and now he can't leave his bed. He's disabled. Max hasn't been to school once, and now he never will. If you ever read this letter, know that I hate you. It would have been better if you were in Max's place when that car hit him." Back in the bustling city, Emily discreetly received the money transfer, keeping silent about it to Nicholas. How could she possibly broach the topic? After all, he had endured the tragic loss of a child before and staunchly prohibited children from being in his vicinity. Nicholas's intense jealousy, though never manifesting in violence, imposed a suffocating atmosphere, making Emily feel constrained from unnecessary outings, not because of any overt restriction of finances, EUR, He had yet to propose or exert control in that manner, but due to his unwavering suspicion of her faithfulness. Visiting her hometown seemed an insurmountable task, requiring a full day's absence and explanation to Nicholas. Despite their cohabitation resembling a marriage in many ways, the formalities and freedoms seemed withheld. Initially, Emily suffered acutely from the absence of her children, but she gradually forced herself to quash such thoughts. Yet an urgent need stirred within her, a compelling desire to return to her former home, where her mother resided, and held the key to her past. Perhaps there were letters waiting for her there, or maybe her mother had visited. The notion crystallized in the evening, and she resolved to act upon it come morning. Nicholas, attuned to Emily's agitation, fretted over her distracted demeanor, desperately hoping her preoccupations didn't involve other men. Such suspicions terrified him, conjuring memories of past traumas. Nicholas's own history was marred by tragedy. His first wife had orchestrated a liaison during a walk with their daughter, resulting in the child's fatal fall from a cliff. Despite Nicholas's efforts to shift blame onto his wife in court, he felt the punishment had been insufficient. Consumed by paranoia, Nicholas convinced himself that Emily was contemplating escape. Feigning departure for work, he stealthily parked his car around the corner, vigilantly awaiting Emily's next move. When Emily eventually hailed a taxi and arrived at a courtyard, Nicholas's suspicions flared. Driven by jealousy, he shadowed her every move. Observing from a hidden vantage point, he witnessed Emily ascend the stairs, hesitate at a door, ring the bell, and engage in a brief exchange with a woman within. Though he couldn't discern the woman's words, Emily's reaction upon descent was unmistakable. Nicholas leaned in, straining to catch every detail. His heart sank as Emily crumpled, the letter she clutched sending her complexion to a ghastly pallor. Reacting swiftly, Nicholas caught her before she collapsed entirely. Gathering the dropped letter, Nicholas's expression darkened with comprehension. Why? Well, yes, he mused, recalling his stringent prohibition against offspring. Emily, what have you done? Gently settling Emily in the car and laying her on the back seat, Nicholas navigated through a tumult of thoughts spurred by the letter's contents. As Emily stirred awake, her eyes fell upon the letter in his grasp, prompting a surge of panic. Nicholas, please stop. I need to go to the children. I can't comprehend how I let this happen. Despite her impassioned pleas, Nicholas remained silent, steadfastly driving until he announced, "We've arrived." Emily, disoriented and consumed by worry, stumbled out of the car, only then realizing they had returned to her residence. Her distress had clouded her awareness of the journey. Rushing inside, she flung open doors, calling out desperately. Tears streamed down her cheeks until she finally stumbled upon a room filled with children. Jacob sat among them, engaged in conversation with the twins, while Lydia clung to them. "My girls," Emily whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. At the sound of her voice, the girls darted into her arms, their cries of joy matched by Emily's tight embraces. However, Jacob remained aloof, his gaze a mixture of anger and disbelief. Approaching Jacob tentatively, Emily implored, "Forgive me, son. Forgive all of you, please. I will set things right, I promise." After a tense moment, Jacob relented, rushing into her embrace, tears mingling with relief. As this emotional reunion unfolded, Nicholas negotiated with the orphanage director in the hallway, proposing to fund a new game center for the playground to expedite the children's release. "You certainly know how to persuade," the director acquiesced. "Allow him to sign the papers, but expedite the process. I cannot allow them to remain beyond 2 weeks." Grateful yet overwhelmed, Emily found herself unprepared to part with her children just yet. Observing Nicholas waiting at the doorway, she realized he hadn't departed. Approaching her, he suggested, "Emily, go to the director, submit a leave request for the children, and we'll wait for you in the car." Understanding the urgency, Emily nodded, silently expressing her gratitude, and hastened to the director's office. Meanwhile, Nicholas gathered the children and guided them towards the exit. When Emily emerged from the office, she handed Nicholas a slip of paper bearing the address of the facility where her disabled son Max received care. Hastening to their destination, Emily spent an extended period by Max's bedside, showering him with kisses, seeking forgiveness, and shedding tears of remorse. Max initially struggled to recognize Emily, but upon glimpsing Lydia and Jacob, realization dawned. A heavy silence settled over the room, punctuated only by Emily's sobs and Lydia's soft words of comfort to her brother. Suddenly, the tranquility shattered as commotion erupted in the corridor, signaling the arrival of a familiar doctor Emily had encountered at social gatherings with Nicholas. As it turned out, he was a specialist not typically stationed at this facility. Following a brief examination, he exuded confidence, assuring Emily that he could cure Max. He presented Max with the prospect of a treatment that might entail initial pain. "I'll go anywhere. Just get me out of here," Max responded with courageous resolve. The doctor swiftly orchestrated Max's transfer to his hospital, pledging to Emily that he would regain his mobility, albeit at a considerable cost. Emily expressed her readiness to do whatever was necessary, but Nicholas interceded, alleviating her concerns about finances. "Since when do women fret over expenses? Let's concentrate on his recovery," he asserted firmly. As preparations for departure commenced, Nicholas proposed they spend the night at a nearby hotel. Attempting to lighten the atmosphere, he suggested, "How about ordering pizza, not just one, perhaps 5? The children, intrigued by the novelty, eagerly concurred. Amidst the pizza feast in the hotel room, Emily attempted to broach the subject of Nicholas's extraordinary efforts, but he preempted her with a proposition. "Honestly, how could you ever entertain the thought of parting with them? Now at least I can rest assured knowing you won't leave. So I believe it's high time we got married. What do you say?" Overwhelmed with emotion, Emily flung herself into his embrace, her tears serving as an answer.